Welcome to Life Stories, where one wrong move cost a company everything, and the woman they tried to erase became the architect of their downfall. Imagine spending years building something that holds an empire together, only to be dismissed with a smile by a man who never even read the blueprint. Today's story isn't just about ambition and betrayal. It's about what happens when silent strength outlasts loud arrogance, and how sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding all the power. Stay with us, because the storm that's coming isn't just corporate chaos, it's personal, and it's unforgettable. Let's step into the world where trust is fragile, power is blinding, and one woman's quiet resilience rewrites everything. Carter Briggs walked into Vertex Dynamics the way a new king storms a crumbling castle, confident, gleaming, and certain no one else could possibly matter. His tailored navy suit cut through the fluorescent lit open office like a blade. The Rolex on his wrist flashed every time he gestured, as if it needed its own introduction. From where I sat, third row from the window, old laptop humming, coffee cooling, I watched him claim the room like he owned it. I'm Elena Brooks, 32, former director of systems architecture at Vertex, or at least I was when Carter made his entrance that Monday morning. 7 years ago, when the company nearly folded under a hostile acquisition attempt, it was the infrastructure I designed that saved it, an architecture so watertight, the patent office still has my name etched beside it, a small, deliberate clause buried deep inside my contract. But Carter didn't care about foundations. He cared about headlines, quarterly gains, and looking like the smartest man in the building. He called his first meeting within an hour of arrival, standing before a room full of developers and engineers whose work he hadn't bothered to learn. "I'm Carter," he said, his voice like a perfectly tuned sales pitch. "I believe in speed, disruption, and not getting bogged down in legacy systems. We're not just moving forward, we're rewriting the rules." The applause was hollow. I didn't clap. I just tapped my pen against my notebook and listened. Within days, the chaos started. Carter canceled the systems review meetings I'd painstakingly run for years, replacing them with vision syncs that felt more like motivational TED Talks than operational check-ins. He fired 3 managers by email, tossing their years of loyalty aside like outdated user manuals. Worst of all, he started tinkering with Helix, our flagship software, the one system standing between Vertex and oblivion, with no understanding of how it was built. Helix was my blueprint, my blood. 82% of Vertex's operations ran through the code I'd designed, scaled, and fiercely guarded. It wasn't just software, it was the spine of the company. And yet Carter, blinded by his own reflection, didn't even realize the entire system was tethered to a patent he didn't control. By the second week, Carter had reduced my title to tech lead, dismissing years of expertise with a smirk. In meetings, he cut me off, rerouted credit to interns for ideas I had proposed months earlier. I documented everything, every slight, every error, every arrogant misstep. Then, on a cold Friday morning, he strode into my office, leaned against the doorframe like some corporate cowboy, and fired me. "You're a legacy system, Alina," he said, smiling the kind of smile people wear when they think they're winning. "And we don't build the future on outdated code." He didn't know. God, he had no idea. I left quietly, packing my desk into a small cardboard box, the photos, the schematics, the USB drive containing everything that mattered. No one dared to meet my eyes. Fear is contagious in places like this. That night, as Seattle's fog curled through the streets, I pulled my contract from the back of my filing cabinet. There it was, buried in legalese, the patent for the Vertex backbone infrastructure, registered under my name, and a licensing agreement set to expire that Sunday at midnight. No renewal, no access, no Helix. I stared at the page, a strange calm washing over me. They hadn't just fired an employee. They had evicted the architect and thrown away the keys. Saturday morning, while the city moved in slow, rainy drips, I drafted the email. Calm, professional, ruthless. I cited the patent, outlined the licensing terms, noted the expiration, explained with cool precision that unauthorized use of my intellectual property would constitute a breach of federal law. I sent it to Vertex's legal team, CC'd the board, CC'd Carter. Then I sat back and waited for Monday, the day everything would break. What happens when ambition blinds leadership to the very people who hold their fate? Have you ever been underestimated so badly that it became your greatest advantage? The storm hadn't even begun yet, and when it did, I wouldn't just survive it. I would be the one who set it loose. Continue to part 2. Monday morning in San Francisco broke sharp and cold, the kind of morning that carried a metallic edge in the air, a warning few could hear until it was too late. I sat by the window of my small apartment in the Mission District, coffee untouched, laptop open. The clock ticked toward 8 a.m., and with every passing minute, the silence outside felt heavier, more expectant. At 8:07 a.m., my inbox exploded. System error notifications, client access failures, urgent flags from every department. I scrolled through them slowly, a measured rhythm, my pulse steady as the Puget Sound waves I once watched from another life. By 8:15, my phone buzzed relentlessly. HR, IT, even a desperate message from a junior engineer I had once mentored. Elena, everything's down. Helix isn't responding. They're freaking out. Please help. I didn't answer. Not yet. Vertex wasn't just bleeding. It was hemorrhaging. From my living room window, I could almost feel the panic vibrating through the city streets, riding the cable cars, crawling up the glittering towers downtown. Carter's ambition had finally outpaced his understanding. The man who had smiled as he erased my name now stared into a digital abyss of his own making. I dressed deliberately. Dark jeans, a crisp black blazer, hair pulled back in a no-nonsense braid. I wasn't going to Vertex today as an employee seeking validation. I was going as a force they could no longer ignore. The drive downtown was a blur of sirens and gray drizzle. When I walked into Vertex's glass headquarters on Market Street, the lobby buzzed with a low, frantic energy. Receptionists whispered into phones, security guards hovered closer than usual. Employees darted between elevators with tight faces, clutching laptops like lifelines. I didn't wait for permission. I headed straight for the executive floor. The legal conference room was half lit when I arrived, the heavy glass doors swinging closed behind me with a quiet finality. At the far end of the table sat James Whitaker, general counsel, flanked by 2 visibly rattled associates. Carter's seat at the head of the table was conspicuously empty. "Elena," Whitaker said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Thank you for coming. We'd like to resolve this swiftly and amicably." I took a seat across from them, my posture relaxed but unyielding. "Swift is good," I said, folding my hands on the table. "Amicable depends on what you're offering." They slid a proposal across the polished surface, a standard 1-year licensing extension. No public acknowledgement, no revised terms, barely a concession at all. I didn't even glance at it. Instead, I met Whitaker's gaze squarely. "That's not going to work," I said, my voice calm, even as a storm gathered behind my ribs. There was a beat of silence. One of the associates shifted in her seat, tapping nervously at her tablet. Whitaker leaned forward, dropping the pretense. "What do you want, Elena?" The truth was, part of me wanted revenge. A sharp, clean retribution for every dismissal, every insult, every moment Carter had looked through me like I was furniture. But deeper than that, heavier, was something else. I wanted recognition. Not just for me, for every engineer, every woman who had built something vital only to watch it be credited to someone louder and more charming. I took a breath, steadying myself. $12 million, I said. Quarterly renewals, full access only through me or my approved team, public acknowledgement of my patent in all official records. Whitaker's mouth tightened. That's ambitious. Appropriate, I corrected, the edge in my voice finally showing. Before he could argue, the doors swung open. Carter stormed in, face flushed, hair disheveled, his usual polished armor cracked and crumbling. He froze when he saw me. "Elena," he said, a brittle laugh threading his words, "this is unnecessary. Let's talk privately." I stood slowly. "We had that chance, Carter. You made your choice." For a flicker of a second, something almost like regret flashed across his face. But it wasn't real. It was the regret of someone caught, not someone changed. He opened his mouth again, but Whitaker cut him off. "Mr. Briggs," he said, voice taut, "we are handling this." I watched Carter retreat, his shoulders tight with anger he couldn't publicly unleash. Not anymore. Outside the conference room, the rain had thickened into a steady, relentless downpour, smearing the city's sharp edges into something softer, more dangerous. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the water streak down, feeling the weight of the moment. For the first time in years, I wasn't just reacting to someone else's game. I was making the rules. But power, real power, came with a different kind of burden. A choice that went deeper than winning a negotiation or toppling an arrogant CEO. Could I walk away with what I wanted and still live with what it would cost them? Or had the line between justice and vengeance already blurred too far to see? Have you ever stood at the edge of victory and questioned whether crossing it would change you forever? The rain kept falling, and somewhere deep inside Vertex's walls, the real battle had just begun. Don't miss what happens next in part 3. The boardroom was colder than I remembered. Even with the storm of emails, the rattling chaos outside, and the tension so thick it could crack the glass walls, the room itself felt strangely still. As if Vertex Dynamics, after years of moving too fast and too blind, had finally run out of excuses. I sat at the far end of the table, my notes in front of me, but I didn't need them anymore. I wasn't here to plead a case. I was here to draw the final lines. Across from me sat Margaret Ellison, the board chair, sharp-eyed, composed, the kind of leader who listened first and spoke second. Beside her were the others, senior advisors, a few legal counsels, the weight of authority lining the walls. Carter Briggs was absent. Suspended pending investigation, they said, but the echoes of his decisions, his arrogance, lingered in every corner of this room. "Elena," Margaret began, folding her hands neatly on the table, "first, allow me to offer an apology. On behalf of the board and the company, what happened to you should never have happened to anyone." I inclined my head slightly, absorbing her words without flinching. Apologies were words. Systems were actions. "We have reviewed your terms," she continued. "We are prepared to meet your licensing demands. $12 million, quarterly renewals, full system access through you or your approved team, effective immediately." A ripple of exhaled relief moved through the room, but I didn't relax. Not yet. "And more than that," Margaret said, voice softening, "we would like to offer you something else. A return to Vertex, not just as a consultant. We want you to take over as Chief Technology Officer, to lead the rebuilding of the very culture you once saved." For a moment, the room blurred around the edges. It was everything I had once dreamed of, before cynicism sharpened my instincts, before I learned that building something didn't guarantee being seen for it. To lead, to change the system from the inside, to protect others the way no one had protected me. I looked at Margaret, her expression open, waiting. And then I heard it. The voice I had tried to quiet during long nights drafting emails and memorizing clauses. The voice that whispered of late nights alone in the server rooms. The silent battles fought with nothing but resilience. And the deep, unyielding truth that some scars don't disappear just because you're offered a bigger title. I smiled, small and sad. "I appreciate the offer," I said, my voice steady. "And I believe you mean it. But my place isn't here anymore. Not because I'm angry, not because I'm bitter, because what I built, the foundation of Vertex, was never just code. It was trust. And trust, once broken, isn't patched with promotions." The room went still again, but this time it was a reverent silence. "I'll fulfill the consulting contract," I continued. "I'll help stabilize the systems. I'll make sure your engineers aren't left stranded. But after that, I need to build something new, from scratch, on my own terms." Margaret nodded slowly, respect flashing in her eyes. "Then we'll honor that. Whatever you choose to build, Elena, we hope it changes the world the way you changed this one." I stood, gathering my notes, my hands steady, my heart heavier than I expected. Not from regret, but from the quiet grief of letting go of a version of myself I had outgrown. As I walked out of the boardroom, down the polished hallways where whispers had once chased me like ghosts, employees glanced up. Some smiled, some looked away, unsure. But it didn't matter. I wasn't theirs anymore. I was mine. Outside, the rain had broken, leaving the sidewalks slick and gleaming under a rare patch of San Francisco sun. I stood there for a moment, breathing it in, the damp air sharp and clean. At a small cafe 2 blocks away, I ordered a black coffee and pulled out a notebook. No screens, no corporate firewalls, just blank paper and the quiet certainty of beginning again. On the first page, I wrote 2 words in thick, deliberate ink. Foundation first. It would be the name of my consulting firm. It would be the promise behind every contract, every system, every person I would one day lead, that the foundation mattered. The builders mattered. As I sipped my coffee and watched the city breathe around me, I realized something that made my throat tighten. I hadn't just walked away from a broken system. I had walked toward a future where I wasn't an echo of someone else's decisions. I was the architect of my own story. Sometimes you win by fighting. Sometimes you win by leaving the battlefield entirely and building a new world where you don't have to fight to be seen. And that was a victory no boardroom could ever erase. How did this story make you feel about resilience, respect, and starting over? If you loved this story, comment 100 below. Tell us where you're watching from. We love hearing from readers around the world. Share this video with a friend who needs a reminder that their voice matters. Thank you for being part of Life Stories.